My name is Justin Bott. A lot of you that see this might know me as Alex Glass. I got out of prison about 2 years ago after being in for my second time on bank robbery. When I got out, I couldn't get back into any of my old stuff, so I adopted another name. I've been in prison 2 times for robbing banks, and the first time didn't really do a lot for me as far as trying to turn my head around a little bit and live a different way. But the second time did. See, the second time that I went in, I had a daughter that was 4 years old. I was born in Washington State, and at 3 years old, we moved to South Carolina to be with my mom's family. So I grew up in the upstate of South Carolina, Spartanburg, and lived a middle-class life like anybody else would have. I didn't have abusive parents. I didn't have parents that drank. My parents had never done any kind of drugs or anything. So I'm a little bit unique in that fact because I didn't grow up around any of that. My dad was a scoutmaster. My brother was an Eagle Scout and followed in his footsteps and became a scoutmaster. But I was just a little bit different. I was kind of the black sheep. Not to be cliche, but I was. I was just always in trouble. I was always up to some kind of hijinks and shenanigans that weren't always nice, or I don't know. Anyway, I was in trouble all through junior high. I remember getting caught smoking on the school bus, which is probably the stupidest thing in the world to do, but I wanted to look cool to the other kids, and they kind of dared me, so I opened up a window and started smoking on the school bus. I got caught for it, obviously, because you can't smoke on a school bus and get away with it. My vice principal, I had been to see my vice principal in school so much that he told me the only punishment that he had for me was to make my parents write a note saying they understood that I had been caught smoking on the bus. So that was really all that was required to punish me. But none of that ever really mattered to me. Punishment to me was just a way of life. You know, you go do what you want to do. I wanted to look cool. I wanted to be the popular whatever. And I wanted to have my way. I wanted what I wanted. And damn anybody telling me that I couldn't have it. That followed all through junior high. I was in detention hall all the time. Wasn't never much of a fighter. So most of the stuff that I did got detention and stuff like that. I never really got suspended much, but I was always in the office. Moved on into high school and started drinking probably about 14, 15 years old, and loved it from that minute on. And I think a lot of people are like that. You've got people who want to kind of escape who they are and feel something different. And I was one of those people. So partied all through high school, sex, didn't really mess with any drugs, just drank a lot. And there was a couple of times in school where I applied myself and tried to do good. And when I did, I got A's and B's. But most of the time I would go in class and sleep. Just didn't care. Just none of it meant anything to me. So actually my senior at graduation time, I had been part of what they call the Deca Club, and it was basically like business type stuff, Distributive Education Clubs of America. And we had competitions on a district, state, and national level. Well, I made it all the way to the national level and got to go to San Jose, California to be able to compete at the national level. So when it came down time to graduation, I got called up for senior awards night. I got called up to the stage to get an honorable mention for accomplishing that. Graduation was the next day, and I didn't graduate. I wasn't there that night. So even though I got awards, I didn't graduate because I just didn't care about school. I had somebody forge report cards for me so that my parents would think I was doing okay. Went to summer school, still didn't have enough credits at the end to be able to graduate. So I ended up going to night school to be able to finish graduating. Graduated, got my diploma a couple of days before Christmas. A couple of days after Christmas of 1990, I shipped out for Fort Jackson, joined the military. Came from a military family. My dad and my brother were both military. And just seemed like the right thing to do. You know, like, get your shit together, man. So I got in there and I did okay. Could have done very well. Got voted as, whatever, Soldier of the Month, I think, a time or two. I just always had trouble applying myself to anything, though. So over time, some stuff happened. I was over in Germany and we had phones, and the phones got abused, and basically free phone calls were made when they weren't supposed to be made. And I ended up getting kicked out of the military for that, just shy of 2 years. So the military didn't work out. So I came home, went to work for my dad at a shop that he worked at. He was like, come work for me. So I did that for a little while. To back up just a second, my desire to feel differently than what I normally felt really flourished over there in Germany. There was a lot more access to drugs and everything. I stayed away from drugs in high school. I mean, I remember saying stuff to my friends about smoking weed. And then I got over there and I tried it, and suddenly everything was okay. It was all right to do that stuff then. So when I got kicked out of the military, I went full force into that. Had I not been working where my dad works, I probably wouldn't have kept that job as long. But because it was my dad, I stuck around for a little bit longer, and it kept me clean a little bit better. But I left that job at one point, and that's when I just kind of started floating around, and that's when things really started getting bad. All I really cared about was partying, having fun, sex, just feeling good. I didn't want anything negative. Didn't want to go to work. Didn't want to get up in the morning, none of that. That's been something that I've always struggled with. I just wanted the good stuff and didn't want to do anything for it. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I started bouncing around at a couple of jobs. I tried selling drugs, but I like doing them a lot better than I like selling them, so I didn't do very good at that. Ended up getting together with a girl, and she was about as crazy as I was. So we partied a lot, and ended up she kept a job, and just our partying got in the way of that, and she ended up losing her job. I tried working for her brother-in-law a little bit. That worked for a minute, and then that fell apart too, because all we wanted to do was party. I was very influenced by a movie that I watched that had to do with bank robbery at Point Break. And I wanted to go rob a bank. At that point, I had done a little bit in the past. Had a buddy of mine that worked for a restaurant, and we'd always talked about the idea of robbing it. And then one night we saw an opportunity when we were drunk, of course, and we did. So we robbed it, and they were able to put two and two together pretty quick. Figured out that we were the ones that did it. So I was 0 for 1 on my criminal endeavors at that point. But that didn't really do much for me. I mean, I got probation out of that, so I didn't really get any time or anything. It was just go report to this guy every once in a while. And I went another, it was in about 93, I think, 92 that happened. So I went a couple more years struggling along and just never could find a niche. I was angry if I didn't get my way. I was angry if I didn't get what I wanted to. I was just always negative about something. If I wasn't just having fun and experiencing everything good in life, then I really didn't want any part of it. So that's kind of weird for me too, because my parents are very hard workers. My brother is, but I just didn't get that somewhere. I kept talking to her about the idea of robbing a bank because I knew she wasn't averse to something illegal, but I didn't know if she was willing to go to that level or not. So being the manipulative person that I was and the user and taker that I was at that time, I hammered away at her about robbing a bank until she finally agreed. So she said she would drive the car. So November 7th, 1995, we went to rob a bank. I put on a devil's mask, a hoodie, gloves, the whole works, and had her drop me off at the front. I bolted into the door. I had a BB gun because I wasn't going to shoot anybody. I'm not a violent person. So I go in there. I jump over the counter. I had a pillowcase. Told the ladies, the tellers behind the desk, to fill the bag up. So they did. I jumped back over the corner and off I go. She pulled around the corner and was waiting on me. And it worked perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. After we got caught on the other one, the FBI told us in the elevator that was one of the best that they had seen, that they had nothing to go on. So it went very well until we got to the second one. And that's one of the things that nobody ever talks about with crime and things like that, is like, I've had a lot of conversations with people on the inside, and if they would have just quit earlier in the game. But I didn't do that, because none of us ever do. This is just what we know. So out of that bank, we got $5,000, which, even back in the 90s wasn't that much money, especially when you have bills backed up and everything like that. So by the time we paid off some bills and stuff like that, there just wasn't that much left over. And we weren't working, so that went through pretty quick. So exactly 1 month later, on December 7th, we went to rob the second bank. The second bank was a little bit of a different setup, because it was, the first one, there was a clear place where we could get away from the bank and not be seen anymore. This one, we went in just like we did before. She dropped me off at the front door. Only beside the bank, there was a parking lot with a grocery store and a couple other little stores. So she went and parked in the parking lot. And I was going to run over from the bank to get in the car and get away. In hindsight, that was completely stupid. There was no way for us to really be able to pull that off, because it was just too visible. So we go back to her house, or back to a friend of mine's house that I was staying with at the time. Dropped my car off that we used for the getaway car, and I stashed a few things in the house, and then we got in her car and took off to her house. Unknowingly, I caused a great deal of damage to my buddy's sister by doing that, because the cops came there. Somebody had followed us, and they dragged her out and wanted to know where we were and everything else. I was glad I got the opportunity to apologize to her at some point, and she accepted it. So we go back to her house in her car. This was a lot more money out of this. The first time I went in, we only got that $5,000. So the second time when I went in this one, I run in the door. I had this stupid idea of being some notorious guy, so I wore the same devil mask that I wore in the first one. Let's go ahead and link them together. So they automatically nailed us for the first one too. But when I went in this time, I went in with the same devil mask, the hoodie, and the gloves and everything. Jumped the counter. And this time when they filled the bags up, I said, no, where's the rest of it? Where's the big money? And then they opened drawers up underneath the second drawer down. And that's where all the banded money was that refilled their drawer. So from that one, we got $22,000. Unfortunately, we never got to spend any of it. We got back to her house. I took the money in the bedroom, dumped it all out on the bed, grabbed a pen and paper, and was going to start counting and see how much we had. She came walking back in from the living room, and she's like, hey, baby, there's a cop car outside. I said, okay, is it just one cop? She said, yeah. I said, okay, well, that's not a big deal. And then about 10 seconds later, she said, okay, now there's 3 out there. And that's when we pretty well knew that it was over. That was it. So very quickly, there was about 12 cars there. I knew it was up because the way that I had planned the whole thing was that I knew if I could get away from the bank clearly, then I felt like we'd be okay. We didn't make it away from the bank. So we get a call from her sister who lived next door and said, hey, the police are over here and they say something about you guys robbing a bank and they want you to come outside. So, that's when it really hits. And it gets you in the gut that, this wasn't a game you were playing. This was real shit, It was very humbling. We hung out for a few minutes and talked about it, but neither one of us wanted to run out in a hail of bullets like we romantically thought we would want to do. When you get to that point, all you really want to do is just stop running from whatever it is you're running from. So we went out and took our medicine. I got 63 months out of that, so 5 years and 3 months. Ended up doing a little over 4.5 years. I got out in 2000, and my parents had moved back out to Washington State for a little while, so I didn't have much of a landing pad as much as I would have normally. So, but I did land a good job straight away, and was able to kind of get up on my feet and whatnot. And then I met a girl, and her and I ended up getting married after about 1.5 years, 2 years together. Bought a house, and by all outside appearances, we were doing great. But I still had this thing inside me. It was just very unhappy and miserable. I blamed everything else on everybody else, except for me. So after 7 years of that, about 2007, 2008, I just walked away. I was like, this isn't what I want to do anymore. I don't like this. And I'm probably one of the world's greatest self-saboteurs that ever existed, because I will blow up everything that I have. Build it and then blow it up and start it back over again. It was almost like it was a disease for me. So I walked away from that, and I went and lived with a friend of mine, one of my party buddies, who had his head on straight. He wasn't like me, that just couldn't quite get it together. During that time, none of this time from 2000 up until my current charges did I ever hold a job for more than 6 months, a year, 1.5 years maybe. That was about it. I found it offensive for me to have to go spend my life helping other people get rich and having people in charge of me as managers and bosses that I didn't feel like deserved to be able to do that. I've always had a big problem with authority, and that manifested itself through everything that I've ever done. So I was always looking for a hustle. I was always looking for, something to get out of going to a regular job every day and working in a warehouse and working for some dipshit that I don't want to listen to. So I was always entrepreneurial, because I knew that was the way to, number one, be able to make a good, comfortable living, or get rich. If, at the time, that's what I thought I wanted, was to get rich and just be filthy rich. When my parents asked me as a kid what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be rich. I didn't say anything particular. I just wanted to be rich. So I always knew that starting my own thing and coming up with my own way and my own business, that was the way that I needed to go. But having not taken the hard knocks that I had taken, I didn't want to put the work into actually doing it. For a lot of people, it's just normal. They understand that, to get something out of life, you got to work hard for it. Man, I think I knew that, but I didn't really want to accept it. So I thought I was going to find a new way and a better way. So I kept trying all these things, but the whole time I was still a slave to alcohol and my negative mindset. Even when I got a job, I would be negative about everything. I let everything bother me. Somebody could say the slightest little thing to me and not even mean for it to be a slight. And it would send me into a downward spiral that would last a day or a week or 3 or 4 days. Just anything. I was a miserable person. So I never kept jobs through any of that time, really at all. That's when I really became like a user and a taker, with regards to my relationships and people. I did a lot of bad things. I've heard a lot of stories because I've been in a lot of groups. And I know that some of the things that I did weren't as bad as some things other people did. But it wasn't representative of the person that I wanted to be. Because even though I may have been a taker and a user, I genuinely cared about people. I just didn't know any other way to do things, maybe. I'm not sure exactly. But I never really meant any malice towards anybody. Never meant to hurt anybody. But as it turns out, I did that quite a bit to the people that I love the most. So I was trying to turn everything around, and I met another girl. Actually, let me back up just a second because there's a key little point that happened in my life. I was going through a breakup with a girl that I've been with for about a year. And during our very ugly, very drunk, to the point where cops had to be called, breakup, she said something to me that stuck with me really hard. And she said, "You know what you're going to do?" I said, "What's that?" She said, "You're going to die alone, miserable, and unhappy." Of course, at the time, I just blasted her back and yelled back and this and that and the other. And that really stuck with me because I realized what an unhappy person that I typically was all the time. And the fact that I brought other people into that is just abhorrent to me now. But suffice it to say, I met another girl. She had 2 kids, and their dad had passed away. So they grew up largely without kids. And at the time when we met, I had 2 or 3 months sober. So I was working on getting sober and was doing pretty good. And we dated for a little while. It was kind of a whirlwind romance because it was a month or 2 before I asked her to move in with me. Of course, I didn't have it. I had a job at the moment, but I hadn't had a job. So I was living at my parents' house while they were away in the RV. So I called them up and asked them if I could move them over there while we got on our feet. They said okay. Took a bit of talking, but they said okay. She moved in, and I could tell within a short period of time that it wasn't going to work very well because, well, kids are kids, They do what they do, and they do what they want to do, and I hadn't done any of the healing that I needed to do to be able to handle being a parent, especially to somebody else's kids, I guess. So, but nonetheless, we stayed together for a little bit. She didn't have anywhere else to go, so she was staying there, and ended up getting pregnant. Had my beautiful baby daughter. Now, I was one of those guys that never wanted kids before. I was staunchly against it. Just didn't want the responsibility. And to be honest, I was proud of myself for being able to admit that instead of having one and not being prepared to take care of it. But as it turned out, that's what I did for a little while. We ended up moving, bouncing around to a couple of crappy places. Finally settled back down in South Carolina. We were living in North Carolina at the time. And our fighting was so bad and so regular that we, for all intents and purposes, didn't live together. I was crashing couches with friends. I slept in my car a few times. I had a storage building set up out back at one point that I stayed in most of the time. Just whatever it took not for us to be together and fighting all the time. But the one thing I did that I'm grateful for was, even if I wasn't a good dad, I was at least there. I spent time with her. I loved her. We played. We did stuff. So that's the only saving grace that I have towards being able to have a relationship with her now. But things were so bad. I had a little piddly job that wasn't paying anything. $300 a week, something like that. Money wasn't good. Never was for me. Her and I kept fighting, and there was a couple of times that it was so bad that I was like, you just make me want to go shoot myself. I don't even want to live if this is the way that I've lived. You have me trapped and blah, 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 blah. Now, she knew what I'd done before. She knew that I'd robbed banks several years ago. So that became kind of my new threat. I started threatening her with, well, fuck it. I'm just going to go start robbing banks. And basically, I guess you could say I kind of did the same with her that I did to Jamie, to the other girl. I talked about it enough that it became something for her to think about. And at some point, she finally accepted that that's what I was going to do. Although I don't think she had full belief in it, she got to the point where she wasn't going to fight me on it. So one day I picked a bank in my hometown and found a place that I could park that was far enough away from the bank that it wouldn't be seen. And I ran through a little stand of trees, and at one point I stopped in the middle of the trees and I was like, man, are you really going to do this? And of course I was drunk at the time, at least partly drunk, and I don't even remember what else there was, but I was always on a couple of things. Then I thought about all the times that I thought about this in my head and how I could be better at it this time. This time would be better. This time I wouldn't get caught. Well, everything you can say to justify shit to yourself. So I went ahead and I ran in. Did a little bit different this time. I didn't use a BB gun or any kind of weapon. Didn't use a note because I didn't want to leave anything behind. I ran in, mask, hoodie, gloves, 2 grocery bags, handed the grocery bags to the tellers and said, fill them up, no dye packs, no tracers. I want the bottom drawers, so give me everything you got. Do it now. While they were filling the bags up with money, I did a 360 around the bank to make sure nobody was trying to make any kind of move on me personally. By the time I got back around, they'd have the bags filled up, and I took off running. Hell bent for leather to my car. Got to get out of there. If I can get away from the bank, I'll be okay. Actually passed a cop that was responding to the call on the way out. But I got away. Went riding around for a little bit, and I called her and had her meet me somewhere. And she's like, did you really do it? I said, yeah, I did. And it's a sickness. I mean, once you know that the tellers are trained to give you the money and you're in a desperate spot, you don't have any money, you're miserable with life, and you know that in 60 to 90 seconds you can have $20,000 in your pocket. At some point, you can convince yourself to go do that again and again and again. So I did. I went and did it again. This time I actually robbed the bank that I hit the first time because the layout was pretty much the same. I honestly think that bank's gotten robbed like 10 times or more over the last several years. So I went and did that one, and that one went like clockwork. The entire same scenario. Walked in, gloves, hoodie, mask, 2 bags, fill them up, no dye packs, no tracers, do it now. Both drawers, all that. In my mind, I had it figured out. The only thing that I didn't really have was what happens while I'm in the bank, because a cop could pull up to cash a check, whatever the case might be. Got away with that one. That lasted for a little while, and when the money ran out, I went to do another one. That was about the end of the year, I guess, maybe in 2016. Got about $24,000 at that one, and tried to make that last, but easy money, easy go. Easy come, easy go. What's kind of sad is that I never really bought anything with any of that money. All I really did was use it to not have to do anything, to be able to get drunk and high. And to take care of them. Because I still took care of my daughter's mom and her. So then went to do the fourth one. And I thought I had it pretty well set up. And I did. It was the element of not knowing what's going on when you're inside the bank. And I'm pretty sure that's the way we got nabbed on the first one. So I went in this bank and did the deal. Ran out and got in the car and took off. And when I got to the end of that road, I was making a little loop. So I was going this way and then getting back on the main road. There's a main highway right here. So I went up here and I took a left and I started going down that road and I saw a car behind me. I was like, wait a minute, wasn't that car just behind me? Okay. Now, something that a lot of people don't understand is that when you do something like this, there's so much adrenaline that it's hard to think. It's enough adrenaline to just about make you throw up. I remember specifically coming out of one and not being able to see anything except what was right in front of me. I remember specifically there was no peripheral vision. So it's such a huge, incredible amount of adrenaline rush that it's hard to think. So I get this car behind me, and I'm like, this guy follow me? So I made the other turn that I needed to make to get back on the main road, and he turned there too. So when I got up to the main road, I was just about convinced, not quite. So instead of turning right like I'd planned and going out to the interstate, I just shot straight across. Almost in a panic mode at this point, because I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Because I'm not a violent person. I don't have a gun. I'm not going to get out and shoot him. So I start driving just a little bit, trying to figure out what to do, and then I saw blue lights behind me. So when I saw the blue lights behind me, I snapped out of whatever I was in, trying to figure it out, and hit the gas and tried to run. Adrenaline, drunk, on pills, crashed into a building, about 35, 40 miles an hour, airbag, all that. I'm sitting there trying to come to and knowing that I need to get up and run when I had a cop with a gun in my face. And I remember after they had me in handcuffs and everything, one of the cops was good enough to let me smoke a cigarette before I went to jail. So they moved my hands around from the back to the front. And I decided to run. There's like 9 cops there. I got handcuffs in front of me and I'm drunk. What the hell am I thinking? Right? So I went and knocked one cop over. He ended up going down the hill and getting hurt and breaking his ankle. And of course, I didn't get anywhere before I was tackled and got the crap beat out of me. And I think subconsciously I knew that if I didn't make some kind of dramatic change in my life, then I was going to keep doing damage and hurting people. So, as upset as I was that I got caught for robbing the banks, there was still a big part of me that was almost like, I'm not out here in the world anymore, so I can't hurt anybody. And that was really one of the biggest things to me. Was all my life I had people around me who loved me, and I didn't care. I didn't care. So I remember telling one of my best friends when I was 30 that if my next 30 years were like my first 30, I didn't want to live them. So here I was at 45 years old, halfway through that next 30, and I was the exact same Justin that I'd always been. So I knew that this one had to do something. This had I not had my daughter, I probably would have killed myself, and I really believe that. But since I had her, I couldn't allow myself to do that. I'm adopted, and that little girl is the only blood relative that I have, that I know of. And don't get me wrong, I have the most wonderful parents that I could ever want in the world. They have done nothing but support me and love me, and I would never trade them for anybody. But, you know, just to have that blood relationship with somebody, she means more to me than anything else in the world. So I knew that I had to get something done. I couldn't kill myself. So I think subconsciously I did this until I got caught so that I would go and get myself right. So there was a couple of times that I called it my forced, what do I call it? My forced extended rehab. I ended up getting 45 months sentenced and did about 3.5 years. So it was my 3.5 year forced rehab. But while I was in there, I really started to do a lot of looking at myself. And I was like, do you like this person you are? And when I really, pointed my vision back at myself, no, I didn't like who I was, I had friends that were mad at me. I had friends that I would only call when I needed some money. I still cared about them as people, but there was a part of me that was just shut off. I'm not sure any better way really to explain it. I've always said that I've never been wealthy in money, but I've always had great friends and people around me, and that's the truth. I don't know if I just took them for granted or exactly what it was, but I became a person I just didn't like very much. And when I sobered up and was able to sit down and look at that, then I held out the other hand and I said, okay, who do you want to be? You've got the power to sit here and be whoever you want to be, because ultimately it's my mind. But I'm letting it run me instead of me running it. So I've got one friend of mine. I've got a couple of friends that stuck with me through this. I lost a couple of key friends through this whole thing, and I understand why. I'm not really bitter about it. But I have one friend of mine that I've been friends with for about 32 years. And he's one of the most awesome people I know. He's just one of those people that being around him makes you feel better. So I started looking at him and the attributes that he had and the things that he did. And I did a lot of reading. And I learned a lot more maybe not a lot more. I learned enough to know how the brain works, that it works like a muscle, and that you have to work to start creating different pathways to thinking different ways. So I started looking at the things that made me so unhappy, and it would set me off and send me down a spiral. And I read a couple of books about just happiness and things like that, and it really came to my attention, and I got a level of belief with it to where I knew that happiness was a decision that you make. Happiness was a decision. You can choose consciously to let something drive you crazy, or you can just let it eat you up. Letting it eat you up is your brain on autopilot. Not wanting to experience anything negative is your brain on autopilot. Letting everything get you mad is your brain on autopilot. All it is you being lazy and not wanting to exert the will over your brain to change its patterns. So I started working on that, and that became my focus. I had this time to sit here and work on myself, and damn if I wasn't going to get out and be better for my daughter than I was when I went in. So it started with little things, just noticing, okay, this makes me feel a certain way. Do I want to be bent out of shape about that, or do I want to just let it pass? And it's a lot more beneficial to me to just let it pass. But it's stopping and taking that time to think about that for a second is really where it all starts. And once I started doing that a little bit, then that encouraged me to do it a lot more. So, I mean, our lives are the sum of the decisions that we make. And pretty much all of my life across the board, I had made pretty shitty decisions. And that was something that I need to work on. So I started working on it. And 3.5 years later, I still wasn't perfect. I still had screw ups. I still allowed people into my life that weren't good and that ended up, screwing me over. But I was a lot better than I was. I wound up in the Rdap program in prison, which is the Residential Drug Abuse Program. It's a 9-month intensive, not quite boot camp, but right there at it. It's within the prison. You stay in your own housing unit for 9 months and you work on this. And while I was there, my drug treatment specialist came to me and he's like, hey, I got this guy I want you to help. I'm going to move you two into a room together. He needs some help with, reading and stuff like that. So my first thought was, man, I'm fine where I'm at. Why are you going to move me in here and make me do all this extra work? And then I said, no, just sit back. Don't let yourself do that. So I moved up into a cell with this guy. We hit it off like nobody's business. He was a biker guy from Detroit. And he was loud and he was crass. But he was trying to do better. He didn't want to come back to prison anymore. We were about the same age. And he saw that I was working on myself and he jumped wholeheartedly in with me. So we had great talks and we formed a really good friendship. And that was really where it started for me to know what kind of work that I wanted to do in my life. I knew that working for, in a warehouse or whatever for some company, it was never going to satisfy me as far as what I wanted to do. So I started thinking about doing, something else with regards to doing some kind of service work. I've been a jackass for 45 years, so I figured maybe I could use the rest of the time to try to do some good in the world. While I was in there, we all had to be on a committee. So I was on the reentry committee, and it was there that I saw how just shoddy, out of date, incomplete, and no good all of their reentry resources were. So that kind of started me thinking, because a lot of the guys in there had a hard time, doing resumes, doing anything to do with the world, filling out paperwork, job up, whatever it was. They just, they had a hard time doing that. But even though I never really did it well because I just had no desire to, I still knew how to navigate the world out here pretty well. I was always a writer, and, like I said, back in high school, when I did apply myself, I did quite well. I had no motivation to do anything in this system. So that was kind of where my next phase in life, and what I think will be the rest of my life, started, was by doing that. So when I got out, I wanted to start a reentry organization specifically for the feds, because there wasn't anything like that. I went to get a job after I got a halfway house, because when I was at halfway house, we were on COVID lockdown. I left the halfway house one time my whole time I was there, and that was to go get a COVID test. So when I got out of halfway house, I went to get a job. Did all the online application and everything, and went to the temp agency. They had told me, yeah, no problem, we'll hire felons and all that. I get up there and they pull my background, and they're like, no, we can't hire you. You're too fresh and your crime's too serious. But call these people. It was called the Justice Resource Center in Asheville, North Carolina. And I got my now friend, Amanda, on the phone. She answered the call. And as soon as the temp agency had said to me, this reentry council, my ears perked up, because that's what I want to do, is work in reentry. So immediately I was, okay, I'll call. So I called her, and we talked for 45 minutes on the phone. I told her about what I was trying to do, about me trying to get a job, blah, blah, blah. It's turned into a friendship that's still going on today. We've been friends a little over 2 years now. During one of our early conversations, she said, what you need to do is you need to go become a peer support specialist. And what a peer support specialist is, someone who's taken their lived experience of what they've gone through and recovered from it to help others and support others that are struggling with the same kind of challenges. And before she even explained to me what it was, the word peer kind of hit it off. So I said, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to be a peer support specialist. So she ended up helping me get a job, which was just, kind of a stopgap job, something to do, while I worked on getting my peer support specialist certificate. And I got that, and then I did an internship and some volunteer work for Sunrise Community for Wellness, for Recovery and Wellness in Asheville. Amanda had put me in touch with some people there. So I did an internship and some volunteer work and put in the hard work. And when it came around the next year, about April of the next year, they had a full-time job for me, and I took that. And the difference that it felt to go in to do a job like that every day, I knew I'd found, where I was supposed to be. I didn't want to just be there and be a cog in a wheel making money for somebody else. I just wanted to do something different. So going out and helping people and being of service felt so much better, and it felt right to me about where I was. So when I first got out, I reached out to maybe about 5 guys that I had been in prison with. And of course, they were all like, oh, you ain't going to write, you're going to forget about us, blah, 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 blah. The response that I got when I reached out to these guys and sent them letters and gave them my phone number and email address was all the validation that I needed, that I was doing the right thing, because they were just literally blown away that I didn't just leave them. I kept up with them. And unless you've been inside there, you don't realize how lonely it is and how alone you feel. It's a very toxic environment. with not a lot of positive reinforcement anywhere. So when I reached out to them, they were all very grateful. And there's newsletters that go into the BOP, which is the Bureau of Prisons. It's what I've never done anything with the state. All I've ever done is federal time, so that's all I know anything about. So that's where my focus is. But there's some newsletters that go in there but they're all legal based. New laws that are passing and things like that, and there might be some religion ones, or whatever. But I'm not much of a religious guy, so I don't even know if there were. But there was nothing really encouraging, motivational, anything like that. So that's what I sought out to do, was send, take a motivational speech and transcribe it and email it. Because all we could get in there was a text email. No pictures, no anything, no emojis. So I started doing those little things and just trying to throw some jokes in there, to just lighten everything up and let them know they weren't forgotten. And it caught on pretty good. Got a had a good many followers. As I've gotten busier kind of rebuilding my life over the last 2 years, it's dropped off a little bit. I haven't been quite as consistent with it. But I've still got 30-some guys that I send an email to. Something that I found out about this early on was that if I hit the gas pedal on it, it's going to go. I did when I first got out, and it quickly got to a point that I was overwhelmed by how much I had to do. So I'm trying to work this balance with the whole thing. I've been with Sunrise for about a year and 3 or 4 months now. I've had to rebuild my relationship with my daughter. I've had to rebuild the relationship with her mom, which was a little harder. I've had to rebuild everything from scratch. Going to prison by yourself when it's just you at 23 years old is a whole lot different than going to prison at 45 when you've got a 4-year-old daughter. That's the level of shittiness that I've gone to. But anyway, so I've slowly started working on this and just working on it when I can, because working, most of the time that I worked, I was at an emergency homeless shelter, which, while it was very rewarding, it was also very, very taxing. And, you come home at the end of the day and you just got nothing left. So it's been a little bit slow to get going. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that I've been working on this for 2 years. I've stuck with this, and that's what lets me know that I'm going in the right direction. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So there isn't much of anything by the way of resources for reentry inside the feds. Well, they put on a good show. We had a book that thick at one of the prisons with reentry resources. I sent off a bunch of letters, never got a single letter back. It's all outdated. It's all, if you know anything about anything, you know that stuff changes. And if you don't go update it, then it's no good anymore. So that's how pretty much everything is. In the federal system, you get time in a halfway house to supposedly be able to get on your feet. Those places are set up, in my opinion, just as kind of a test. They'll give you enough rope to be able to see if you're going to hang yourself. But the employees are making $10, $12 an hour. They're overworked and stressed and not making enough money to be that way. So they don't really care. They just want to get through their shift and go home. So none of those resources are there. And I think that most people in this country are starting to realize that, the government, they're really not going to do much for us. If we're going to do anything to make our situations better, then we have to start doing things for ourselves. We have to start taking care of each other. And that's really the only way anything's going to happen. So I've worked hard on putting all this together, and I've got it almost together. The project that I'm working on that I'm most excited about, well, before I get to that, usually what I do is, I'll put out an announcement on the newsletter and say, basically, if you have a year or less of your time, get in touch with me. And what I'll do is I'll find out, let me know what halfway house you're going to, what city it's in, and I'll go find an organization like Sunrise in that city. Sunrise is a purely peer-led organization, which means we don't have clinicians or anything like that. We're all peer support specialists. So we're all people with lived experience of, addiction and criminality and mental health disorders and all kinds of stuff. These organizations are located all throughout the country. They're everywhere. So the project that I'm working on the hardest right now is to set up and make contact with a peer organization, a peer-led organization in every city that has a federal halfway house, with the further goal of being able to connect a peer support specialist in the area that they're going to be released to before they even leave prison. If they can make that contact before they leave prison, they have somebody to be able to talk to when they get out. At the very least, what I want to be able to do is give them a phone number and a name so that when they get to the halfway house, they can call this person that they'll be able to relate to because they've been through a lot of the same things. And it will be a number for them to call for somebody who has local resources. They've been in this town. They know the city. They know what companies hire felons. They know where the food pantries are. They know where, sober living houses are. They are hooked into the resources that the halfway house is not going to be hooked into. The other thing that it does for them is it provides them with a community that will, in most cases, accept them as their new social circle. Most of the people that I hang out with now are people that I met through Sunrise or the recovery community in Asheville. That's the biggest thing that I can see that we can do, that I can do right now to try to help. Down the road, I want to do a lot more. I want to be able to go back in and do motivational speaking and try to get the people who want to change their lives involved with what we're doing. I'd like to have multiple motivational speakers go do that. Another big thing that I would like to do is be able to get some correspondence courses in place for running a business, for bookkeeping, for grant writing, whatever the case might be. Something along those lines that's a skill that they're not able to get in there. Most of the people that I ran across during my prison time, they're not much of an employee mentality. They have the same kind of problem I do. Problems with authority, whatever the case might be. They want to go out and do their own thing, start their own business. Several people that I've talked to, people coming up to us, can't tell you how many, can you help me write a business plan? Can you help me write a business plan? So I think that's one of the biggest things that will help those guys in there is to learn the fundamentals of running their own business. Doesn't really matter about a degree. It's about the knowledge of being able to get out there and do this on your own and be able to build yourself up. So that's what I've got in mind to be able to do. I've been working really hard at it. I have gotten aligned with other nonprofits in Western North Carolina. I've got my corporate paperwork done, and I'm waiting to get my tax exempt status. And then I can start trying to get grant money so that I can do this full time. And to me, that's what seems like it's so simple to so many people is such a big deal to me. It's me living my best life. It's me living what my dream would be. And that's for me to be able to work from home primarily, for me to be able to work myself and and bring to fruition the ideas that I have, and not have a boss over me who doesn't like my ideas because he didn't come up with them. So, and then the biggest element of that is that I'm not doing this for money. You know, I don't care about being rich, you know, not anymore. I just want to be happy. I want to be able to wake up every morning and know that I'm giving something back, that what I do is valuable to people in a way that makes them better people. So, yeah, I'm really excited about it. So much good stuff has happened since I've gotten out. I've had people line up all around me to support what I'm doing. And the past few weeks particularly have been spectacular. So I am to the point that I'm going to go start seeking grant money. I'm going to seek private funding as well, because I'm ready, you know. And at this point right now, it's hard for me to take on doing any more of the work because I only have so many hours in a day. I have to go work full time, and then I come home and I keep working. I keep on working everything from Phoenix. That's really about it. There's a fundraising presentation that I've set up and put together. You know, I know this thing's not sexy. It's you know, it's not going to be like Gangnam Style and go viral. Nothing like that's going to happen. So I'm not necessarily looking for little small donations. I'm not going to turn them down, but I'm not trying to take money out of people's pockets that don't have it to take. So, but what I will ask is if there's somebody that you know that can put me in touch with somebody they know, that can get me in front of that person that's going to recognize what an opportunity this is and what a good thing this can be, to pass it along to them. Because I think that's really all it takes is finding the right person who's got the backing to be able to do this and believes in it and recognizes the value in it. And once I get there, I'm not really worried about anything. I know that I'm going to work my ass off at this and I'm going to make this happen. I appreciate everybody listening to my story. I'm not the most exciting storyteller in the world. It's not really what I do, and this was a hard story for me to tell because I've told it in snippets and pieces before, but I've never really sat down and said it all. And I know there's some people in my life that probably aren't going to want to see it. But that's okay. You guys listened. I'm very grateful to you, and I appreciate it. Just look out for each other out there, man. All of us, everybody that's watching this, chances are you've been justice involved in some way. You've been to jail, you've been to prison, you've been somewhere. It's tough. It's tough on us. Keep in mind that everybody's going through it out there, you know, and everybody's just trying to get through it the best they can. So we got to be kind to each other. Have your conversations and with a mind toward understanding instead of being right. That's about all I got. If anybody's got any questions, my email will be up under this. A link to my website, phoenixreentryresources.org, will be posted up beneath this as well. I'll have my email there. If anybody would like to get in touch with me, I'll do whatever I can to help. I really will. As much as resources will allow me to. But I'm one person. There's only so much I can do. But together we can do a whole lot.